My name is Richard Lawson. Most folks call me Rick. I'm 80 years old. I've been married to Mary for 58 years. We raised 2 kids, Tom and Lisa, in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I spent 35 years at the same manufacturing plant. I was respected there. I worked hard. I provided. And still, if I could sit across from myself at 30, I would say something that might surprise myself. I would tell myself to take the risk. At 30, I was already steady, already reliable. The kind of man supervisors trusted. The kind of man who showed up early and stayed late without being asked. My boss liked me. The guys on the line became close friends. We shared coffee before shifts and stories after long days. There was dignity in that work. But there was something else too. Now, before I get into this, let me ask you something simple. If reflections like this matter to you, whether you're 80 like me or 30 and standing at a crossroads, would you take a moment to like and subscribe? It helps me keep talking about the things many seniors are quietly carrying. I read the comments and emails myself, and I do my best to answer. It means more than you think. Now let me continue my story. Before I was 30, before mortgages and overtime sheets, I loved to fish. My father and my uncle were dedicated fishermen out at Brinker Lake. Some of my earliest memories are of standing between them in a small aluminum boat, the water quiet at sunrise. I can still hear the way my dad cleared his throat before casting. I can still smell the lake in early summer. Fishing was never about trophies. It was about rhythm, patience, being awake before the world got loud. When I was in my early 20s, I used to dream about opening a fishing supply shop. Nothing fancy, just a small storefront with wooden floors, racks of rods along the wall, live bait in the back, maybe a coffee pot always on. A place where local fishermen could come in, talk about the water levels, trade stories about what was biting. I could see it clearly. And then life sped up. I stopped fishing around 28. Not all at once, just gradually. One missed weekend turned into a season. One season turned into years. I told myself I'd get back to it when things settled down. They never really did. At 30, my father and uncle were still alive, strong, experienced. They would have helped me if I'd tried to open that shop. I know they would have. They had knowledge I didn't even realize was valuable at the time. They would have stood behind the counter with me, given advice, shared contacts. I never asked. Instead, I chose the safe option. The plant offered stability, a paycheck every week, health insurance, predictable raises. When you're 30 with a young family, that feels responsible. It feels mature, and it was. But responsibility and fulfillment are not always the same thing. I used to drive past an empty storefront on Main Street and picture my name on the glass, Lawson's Bait and Tackle. I would think about it quietly while waiting at red lights. Then I would shake my head and remind myself to be practical. Practical became permanent. I gave my best hours to the plant, the early mornings, the sharpest parts of my mind, the energy in my hands. I built someone else's numbers, someone else's production goals. I was proud of my work, and I don't regret working hard. But I do wonder what might have happened if I had built something of my own. There's a difference between earning a paycheck and building a legacy. I didn't understand that at 30. At the plant, I was known, trusted, respected. That matters. But when the shift ended, the building kept running without me. If I had taken a week off, Someone else would have stepped into my spot. If I had opened that shop, it would have carried my name, my values, my way of treating people. I imagine Tom behind the counter on Saturdays, learning how to talk to customers. I imagine Lisa keeping track of inventory in a notebook, laughing when we ran out of minnows too fast in the summer. I imagine my father sitting on a stool near the register, telling stories about the big one that got away. That would have been more than income. That would have been memory layered into walls. Instead, I layered my life into time cards. Again, I was not unhappy. That is important. I loved Mary. I loved our kids. I did what many men of my generation believed was right. Provide, stay steady, avoid unnecessary risk. But there is a quiet cost to always choosing safe. The older I get, the more I see that risk is not the opposite of responsibility. Sometimes it is the deeper form of it. My father passed before I retired. My uncle too. We fished a few times in those later years, but never the way we used to. Standing at their funerals, I realized something that felt simple and heavy at the same time. I had assumed there would always be more time to build that dream with them. There wasn't. Dreams have seasons. So do people. At 30, you think energy will always be there. You think ideas can sit on a shelf without gathering dust. You think you can circle back later. Later has a way of shrinking. If I could sit across from that 30-year-old Rick, I would not scold him. I would not tell him he failed. He didn't. He built a good life. But I would lean forward and say, "You are young enough to try." 30 is not late. It is not reckless to believe you can shape your own path. It is not selfish to want your work to reflect who you are. I would tell him to wake up at 5, not just for someone else's shift, but for his own vision. To use that discipline he gave so freely to his boss and invest some of it in himself. I would remind him that comfort can quietly become a cage, not a painful one, not an obvious one, just a soft, padded routine that keeps you from testing your limits. There is something powerful about building something that carries your fingerprint. A place where your children can say, "My dad created this." A place where customers know your name not because you clocked in, but because you cared. I imagine the conversations I might have had in that shop, the fishermen passing through town, the older men sharing advice, the younger ones asking questions, the slow afternoons when I could step outside and feel the air instead of fluorescent lights overhead. I imagine taking Mary down to the lake after closing early on a Thursday. The shop sign turned to "Back Tomorrow." I imagine my father nodding quietly, proud that I tried. Would it have been easy? Probably not. Some months might have been tight. Some winters might have been slow. I might have failed. But even failure would have been mine. There is a different kind of peace that comes from knowing you gave your own idea a chance. At 80, I do not sit here bitter. I am grateful for my life. Mary and I have shared decades of steady love. Tom and Lisa grew into good, capable adults. I have friends from the plant I still talk to. But when I think about what to say to my younger self, it comes down to this. Do not underestimate the time you have right now. Do not hand all your best years to someone else's blueprint if there is something in you asking to be built. Security matters. Stability matters. But so does meaning. Meaning often requires movement. If you are 20, 30, 40, or even in your 50s and listening, you are standing in a window of strength. You have energy, resilience, the ability to recover from mistakes. That window does not stay open forever. At 80, starting something new feels different. Possible maybe, but heavier. At 30, it would have felt bold, alive. I gave 35 years to one plant. Good years, honest years. But sometimes I wonder what 35 years poured into my own shop might have become. Maybe Tom would have taken it over. Maybe Lisa would have added her own ideas. Maybe Lawson's Bait and Tackle would still be open today, a place in Cedar Falls people recognized. Instead, that version of life exists only in my imagination. That is not tragedy. It is simply a path not taken. And here is what I have learned. Regret is often not about what went wrong. It is about what we postponed until the opportunity quietly passed. If I could look at that 30-year-old man, I would say, expect more from yourself, not in pressure, in possibility. You are not here only to maintain. You are here to create. You are not here only to earn. You are here to build. And the hours you trade every day are more valuable than you realize. At 80, time feels precious in a way it never did before. I would not waste it now staying small out of habit. I would not wait for permission. So if you are younger than me, and there is something in you that keeps returning, some idea that will not let you go, maybe that is worth paying attention to. I did not pursue my fishing shop. That chapter never opened. But I can still tell you what I see clearly now. Playing it safe feels wise in the moment. Sometimes it is. But if safe becomes permanent, it can quietly limit the life you might have lived. You do not have to abandon responsibility to pursue something meaningful. Sometimes you simply have to believe you are capable of more than routine. I cannot go back to 30. I cannot stand beside my father at a shop counter that never existed. But you might still be standing at your own starting line. If this reflection stirred something in you, I would truly like to hear about it. I read the comments and emails myself, so do not hesitate to share what dream you once had or still have. And if conversations like this are helpful, please like and subscribe. It allows me to continue speaking about the things many seniors have learned quietly over decades. Let me ask you something before we part. If you could sit across from your 30-year-old self tonight, would you tell them to stay comfortable, or would you tell them to begin? And to all the younger folks listening, let me say this gently. At least give it one real shot. If my story resonated with you, if something in your chest tightened a little, if your heart skipped a beat while you were watching, pay attention to that. That feeling is not random. That may be the part of you that already knows. You do not have to be reckless. You do not have to throw everything away. But do not ignore that quiet pull. Try, build. See what happens when you bet on yourself. I did not take that chance at 30. Maybe you still can. May God bless you all. I will see you on the next one.